Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. And tonight is our Game Week 19 National League preview and predictions. As you can see, I'm not joined by my usual co-host. I suppose Joey's like the super sub at the moment, always appearing on the podcasts. I do really appreciate that, Joe. But Joe, firstly, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad, Luke. Not too bad. Had a couple of podcasts today before this one, so it's been a bit of a podcast evening. And yeah, good to be back on. Obviously, joined you in the week ahead of the York Rochdale game, which turned out to be a bit of a cracker. And obviously, we'll no doubt get into that. And yeah, good to be back on.
Yeah, of course, two fixtures obviously took place on Tuesday evening. There was Forest Green versus Tamworth, and then, of course, York versus Rochdale. So we start with York versus Rochdale then. Of course, for me personally, I was at the fixture and it did live up to the expectation. It was quite one-sided, I suppose, in the second half. An affair, and I think the other side had probably shaded it slightly. I would have said Rochdale in that first half, but the second half was just a completely different story. York came out of the blocks very quickly, scored 3 quick goals in that second half, and Josh Stones at the moment is really living up to, the expectation. I suppose, of course, it's always been seen at York, hasn't it, that you can only play one or the other. And under Stuart Maynard, it's great to see that he's been able to embed them both into the side, whilst actually keeping the squad morale good. I know, I think Hinchell tried it last season, didn't he? Including them both. It didn't seem to work, where this season, of course, under Maynard, in previous weeks, if anything's got to go by based on that, it's certainly been effective. And, of course, Josh Stones added 2 goals to his tally on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I think sign of a good manager, being able to get the best out of him. I saw a couple of York games last year, and bearing in mind he's a striker and a good striker at that. I virtually saw him playing everywhere else other than striker last year. I saw him playing in midfield, on the wing. Josh Stones is a number 9. And I think one thing that Stuart Maynard's done really well is he's managed to use Ollie Pearce in a slightly deeper role, which I think suits him. He's so intelligent, sort of linking off it, of Stones. And then obviously, Stones leading the line. And it was a really good game, good advert for the league. York are flying at the moment, just can't stop scoring. Obviously, Pearce, he's not had the best of luck from the penalty spot, but thankfully scored 2 from open play. And obviously, I think the fact that York managed to score twice within 3 minutes almost killed the half, to be honest. It kind of killed it off. Because Rochdale, the one thing I've always said about them is they're a very, very good team when they're in front, when they're chasing games. That's where they perhaps do have a bit of a weakness, where they're not able to control the ball. York, I said in our preview that I thought York were the favourites and had the pressure, and that I thought they'd win the game, and they did.
Deserved winners as well. I don't think it was much of a fluke in that second half, particularly. As for Rochdale, they had the opportunity to go top on Tuesday night, and of course they failed. A bit of a thumping in the end. From their perspective, a disappointing result.
Yeah, disappointing. Obviously, they've had a really good start to the season. Obviously, some good results, against Forest Green, and they're in the mix. There's so many good teams that every good team's going to beat each other. York beating Carlisle the other week by an emphatic scoreline, and Carlisle are fine. So I don't think Rochdale will be too disappointed. Yes, it probably wasn't their day. They probably could have played a little bit better, and we've seen them play better than that this year. But yeah, I think sometimes you got to hold your hands up and say, York are a really good team. They pass the ball around really well, got loads of goal threats. And there's no disgrace in losing to York. I picked them as the favourites to win it before the season, and I would still stand by them to go and win it, to the end of the season. So, no disgrace. They'd have obviously liked to have made it a little bit closer of a game in terms of the scoreline, but it's one of those days, isn't it?
I think for me, when we speak about the title race, and I agree with you on York still being my favourite, is I think a lot of people often forget that it's a long season. It's a 46-game period. And if you actually look in previous years, I don't think the title winners have really got going until probably like November time. That's going, to Chesterfield, even the Notts County Wrexham saga. I don't think those two particularly broke away, did they, until probably like October time, if I remember rightly. And I think this season will be the case again. I still think York have all the credentials to go on to win this league. I think if you compare them to the sides around them, Boreham Wood, I think at the moment, they're excellent. The football that they're playing, I know they've had 1 or 2 defeats, but they've been fairly consistent as well. They haven't really gone on a bad run of form yet. The issues for them is going to be in January because there's no... And I think Boreham Wood, to be honest, will struggle to keep hold of him, considering his age as well, him only being 22 years of age. A lot of sides from the EFL, not just League Two sides, potentially not even League One side. I think there'll be the odd Championship side also looking at him as a future investment. You take him out the side at the moment, and that's your star player gone in January. You look at Carlisle as well, certainly on a good run of form at the moment. I expect that to continue. The concerns for them is going to be January once again. Are they going to be able to keep hold of Con Clark, or are Peterborough going to recall him? Because I think if you take Con Clark out of that team, I think they're significantly weaker. And even Rochdale, it's not necessarily for me. I think they're going to have struggle keeping hold of their players in January. I think it's the pitch issues with them as well. At the moment, they had the opportunity prior to choosing out of going 7 points clear, and they lost on Tuesday, and they've got home games now. And I think we're going to see a lot more postponed fixtures as the season goes on with their current pitch issues, and it's going to have a detrimental effect because they're going to be playing catch up all season. And I think over a 46-game period, particularly with the football they like to play as well on a pitch like that, I think for them that could be what stops them from going on to win the title. You compare those three to a York potentially. I think they'll to strengthen as well. I think at the moment they're currently looking, aren't they, to bring in another striker as like a backup now that Stones and Pearce seem to be working together up top. And, they've had their injury issues already. And Tuesday night, they've had players out and they still did fine. Fringe players for them were slotting in perfectly in probably York's biggest game of the season. So for me, over a 46-game period, I think York will go on to win this league, in my opinion. But of course, opinions change very quickly, but I still think York will win the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing, perhaps for Carlisle, if they can keep Con Clark, I think they've got a real chance because him and Linney have obviously got a really good combination, those two. And two players who shouldn't really be in this league. I think for York, yes, that the players have slotted in quite nicely. Personally, I think certainly looking at the bench that they had the last couple of weeks, I think there's still a couple of players light, which seems crazy to say with York because they obviously got such a big squad. But I still think there are a couple of players light on the bench. But yeah, they would be my pick still. It's a long season. You only really get to see, the teams that are really going to be there or thereabouts sort of post-December going into the new year. So they're well in the mix, York.
Of course, Carlisle United do still sit top of the tree, but Forest Green are only a point behind them now after victory over Tamworth in midweek. I think they actually did go 1-0 down in that game, and they came back and won 4-2. Brushed Tamworth aside by the end of the game, I suppose. What were your thoughts on that game, just reflecting on it and the effect that could have on the title race?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the one team you don't want to go down to 10 men against is Forest Green. How well they move the ball, how intense they are in their pressing and how athletic they are now. They're certainly, not the sort of team you want to lose a man against. Obviously, losing Cullen and Libbard after 5 minutes. They did actually take the lead through Dooku, but I think once Forest Green sort of got themselves back in level terms and got themselves in front. I think there's only really going to be one winner. Nice to see Temi Babalola get 2 goals. Obviously, they went out and backed Robbie Savage to give him an extra striker. And that's where I would look at, say, Forest Green. They've got so much depth and quality that I think probably they've got, in terms of squad, they've got the best squad in terms of overall depth for me. And yeah, I mean, Tamworth are what they are. They're a very good percentages team. Look to use set pieces quite direct. But one thing that we have seen of them is that when they play the better teams, the quicker teams, they perhaps struggle. And obviously, conceded 4 in that one. But yeah, I mean, those are the sorts of games you just need to win. Find a way to win. And Forest Green are doing that at the moment under Savage.
I think as for Tamworth, they've dipped a little bit. They're down to 11th now, 3 defeats on the bounce for them. I don't think there's any shame in losing to Forest Green, but losing to Woking and Boston. Because I think the expectations for Tamworth have risen because of their good start to the season, what they did last season, you would probably expect them to get more out of those 2 fixtures than losing those. Now, if you look at Tamworth's upcoming games, and this is when we do say it's a long season once again, the next 5 fixtures, Bournemouth away, Rochdale at home, Carlisle away, Scunthorpe away, followed by Southend at home. Even after that, they've got Solihull Moors and Halifax over Christmas. Solihull, for me, will come on to them shortly. They're a side that I think are going to go on a good run of form with some of the signings that they've made under Chris Millington. So, you look at those 7 fixtures for me, and they're probably as tough as you can probably get in this division. So we could see Tamworth quickly slide down the table. Are you concerned for them potentially with those fixtures? I know they do currently sit 11th, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a tough run of fixtures, isn't it? Obviously, the nice easy one against Halifax at the end. It's I think that's the one question mark we would have over Tamworth is they'll finish mid-table. They'll be comfortable. Andy Peakes is a fantastic manager. It's whether they can take that next step, and if they're going to do that, they've got to go and beat the teams that you mentioned. Your Rochdales, your Carlisles. It's all right having, say, a one-off result at home against them, but they've got to go and beat them, convince or, over a consistent basis. It's certainly if they're going to be pushing towards that top 7, they've got to look to try and, get 2 or 3 wins in that period. So, yeah, I mean, that's going to be a really good test of where they're at because you mentioned they are probably, the top 7 teams in the league that they're playing. Obviously, bar Forest Green. So, it's going to be a good test for them.
Just coming to the live chat, we'll see what you guys have been saying tonight. We've had Lee who's coming and said evening all. We've also had Kevin who's coming tonight and said evening guys. Did you enjoy your wet night in York on Tuesday night? I did until it absolutely started chucking it down because we didn't know where to stand throughout the whole game because you want to capture moments from the best area. And it was towards the end of the game when we were behind the goal. And it just absolutely chucked it down. And we tried to get as close to the stand as we could. And we got absolutely drenched. And then straight after that, we had to interview York. Well, we interviewed York's manager when my hair was all messed up and everything. So, it wasn't ideal. But we've also had Jason who's coming tonight and said, evening all, Luke. Luke, you must be a good luck charm for York. Yeah, that's 2 games now I've gone to vlog York City and they've brushed Carlisle and Rochdale. But aside, we've also had tonight, Here We Go Again, Luke, by John Johnson, of course, Carlisle United supporter. He's coming and also said, Luke said, take Linney out of the team and we're weakened. And now he's saying, take Con Clark out of the team and we're weakened. Make your mind up, son. You're weakened without both of them, to be fair. I think you need both of them in to actually go on to win the title for me. Because like I've said, when there's only one of them in the side, teams will man-mark, the better teams will be able to man-mark them out of the game and limit the touches that they're going to get. That's what we saw with Regan Linney as the season progressed. People were catching on to the way Carlisle were playing. It was very one-dimensional going down that left-hand side. Since Con Clark's come in, as I've always mentioned, it creates another option for Carlisle United. You take one of them out of the team and it's back to square one once again. You take both out of the team and I think Carlisle would significantly weaken even further. I think as well, one thing I will say for Carlisle, not just from the attacking perspective, but I think defensively they have improved because Feeney's come back as well. So potentially, you take those two out. I still think they'll be weaker going forward, but I think they're a lot better defensively now than what they were early on in the season. Is that something you'd agree with, Joe?
Yeah, I would. I think it's always difficult when I think Mark Hughes obviously was there for half the season. They make lots of changes in the summer. It takes a while to find that rhythm. I look at my own team, Torquay. Last year they were brilliant defensively, and yet they only started keeping clean sheets about 3 or 4 games ago. When you bring in new players and lots of new faces in the summer, it takes a while to build those relationships on the pitch, find that consistency, and obviously they're now finding that. Obviously, you mentioned Feeney, who's one of the better centre backs in the league. But yeah, I agree on your point about Linney and Con Clark. I think they themselves would probably agree that they actually get the best out of each other, and that both of them are better when both of them are playing. So, I definitely feel that if they can keep Con Clark and Linney for the season, Carlisle will be very close because they shouldn't be playing in this league. And as you mentioned with the defensive side, if they're improving that side as well and are able to continue scoring as they are, then they'll take some stopping.
The only thing for me at the moment with the current squad, I would definitely be looking to bring in another holding midfielder, I think, or box-to-box midfielder, I should say. And I think if you find that, I think at the moment, the way things are going, it will just be down to between Carl and York. I think come the end of the season, I remember watching them against Halifax and they looked a complete different animal to the side that I saw against York City a few weeks ago. Of course, playing Halifax at home, although Halifax have done well, it's a different type of game to playing York away, but you could still see the signs, I suppose, the difference, in the side. Even the players that I thought were probably letting Carlisle down in the early stages of the season actually looked, a class above because they were playing with better players. I think it's McAdam, I think it is, in the midfield. He's someone for me that I think throughout the first, third of the season or so, I wasn't particularly keen on him. I didn't really see what he offered. Recently, with Gilead coming into the side, he looks a lot better. He was probably the best player that night, apart from Lumber. He's another one going forward. Hasn't really offered much going forward this season for Carlisle. Since Con Clark's come in, that's another option now. So you've got a front three there and then Kelly up top. For me, they've got a very good attack. But like I've said, if you take Con Clark or Linney, it just does feel like it all falls to pieces for me. But you could say the same about a lot of sides within the title race. I think it'd significantly weaken if you take key players out of their side. Anyway, moving away from that, of course, this Saturday in the National League, fixtures are set to kick off 3 minutes after the original time in support of the 3 up, 3 down campaign. It's a statement certainly the National League are trying to make. I've given my opinions on this. Do you really think it's going to make much of a difference, Joe?
I got conflicting views on this, really. I think, in generally speaking, it'd be great if we had another, chance of getting promoted. I think most teams would be in favour of that, having another promotion spot, especially with the money that's in the league now. I think to stop that bottleneck in terms of loads of teams. The one thing I do look at is how well the record is of teams that go up from the National League. They usually go up to League Two and are usually competitive at the top end. I think if you take away how difficult it is to get up from the National League, do we potentially see that change? Because I think one of the good things about it is the fact that the competition is so tough to get up. I think that if you are promoted, invariably you're an even better team as a result of it, because you've got to be that much better to actually get promoted. So, I see it both sides. I suppose you can't really make a judgment on whether it would make it worse off in terms of the standard if you were to give another spot away. But I think it probably will happen. eventually. It's just when.
Yeah, I think I've kind of talked it to death, I suppose. It's something, ever since I've known you, Joe, I've probably asked you this about a million times, but it's something that we keep having to bring up. I think as a Halifax fan, I'd love to see that additional promotion spot, because I think there's been many occasions recently where if there was that additional spot, we could have probably got promoted by now. Whereas I think because of there's only 2 promotion spots, sides are forced to spend even more money in the division, and we're seeing sides that are very well equipped to be in League Two and be at least a mid-table League Two side stuck in the National League. I think York City is a prime example. It probably was their time to go up last season with that squad with 96 points. Yet they're still in this division. Then you get Carlisle who've come down, splashing the cash like mad because they want to get straight out of this division. And you've got other sides, like Rochdale are really going for it, aren't they, in terms of bringing in players. And then, for sides like Halifax, probably even Boreham Wood come the end of the season, it has a detrimental effect on them being able to get promoted because, there's these ginormous clubs who shouldn't really be in this division with the fan bases that they've got, being stuck in this league and forced to spend even more money. But then again, I think as a neutral, someone who runs a podcast, the entertainment value is brilliant. I still stand by it. I would genuinely feel, I'm going to be biased, but this is the most entertaining league in English football. A lot of people would say the Championship. You'll get some people will obviously say the Premiership as well. But I think the way that the league's formatted, for teams in it, it's horrible. But, come the end of the season, there's no other league in England where the majority of the division are playing for something, up until the final couple of games of the season. There's only about 5 or 6 teams usually who have nothing to play for, come March, April time, isn't there? So it makes it really entertaining. I know every season as a Halifax fan, hopefully it's the playoffs, but I know we're going to be playing for something until the later months. And it's the same for most teams in this division, if that's relegation or trying to sneak into the playoffs on the final day. In terms of the actual statement that they're making in terms of kicking games off 3 minutes after kick-off, I don't particularly see what it's actually doing. I think everyone's aware of it by now. I think League Two sides are very much aware of it. I think you won't admit it, but I think a lot of them agree that it's very unfair, the format of only 2 sides getting promoted. But you're not going to vote for it, are you? If I was a Halifax fan in League Two in mid-table, I'm not voting. I was the owner. I'm not going to be voting to have an additional relegation spot. But I just don't see what this statement's really going to do. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think, adding 3 minutes on to the start time, that doesn't really achieve anything. It's and nicety to 303 and 3 up, and I don't really, that's not going to make meaningful change. I think I agree that I think it's a little bit like League Two. It's like turkeys voting for Christmas, isn't it? The phrase they always use. If you're let's say I use the example Harrogate, who've been like swirling around the bottom places for the last couple of years. Well, you're not going to vote for another relegation spot because you're likely to go down. So, you'll always have the teams in League Two saying no and the teams in the National League saying yes. It's just the way it is, I suppose.
Let's look at transfers then. There's been 4 major transfers in the National League today. Of course, Zach Brunt has now signed on a permanent basis for Boreham Wood. I was quite surprised by that. Did very well for Barnet in the promotion chase, but of course they felt that he wouldn't be useful to them anymore, and they've allowed Boreham Wood to sign him on a permanent basis. And I wasn't expecting that at all.
No, I wasn't expecting that. I thought that they might extend his loan deal, beyond January, or so to the end of the season. But I wasn't expecting them to get rid of him on a permanent deal. Good player. Obviously made a real difference for them, Bournemouth this year. Been at the club before, knows the club well. And he's a good player, Luke. He's, really good pass for the ball, very creative. I think potentially Barnet have let him go because maybe there's a question mark physically, which obviously I think that's one thing that you always look at if you go up into League Two. Is it's a really physical league and that. But yeah, I mean, I'd have him in my team. He's a good player, and he's under a really good manager there in Luke Garrard, who seems to be getting the best out of him.
Of course, Solihull Moors themselves have brought in fan favourite. He's back for a third spell. Joe Sabaro is back in the National League on loan from Doncaster, I believe. He's always a name I remember from a few years ago. He was just one of the standouts. I remember Wrexham were rumoured to sign him. It never happened in the end for them. But yeah, he's a quality player on his day, and he's very good at linking up with other attackers. That's something I've always felt. The partnerships. We see Carlisle at the moment, the Conclack-Linney partnership, the York, Pearce and Stones partnership. I feel like Solihull Moors might have a little bit of a partnership on their hands with Joe Sabara.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Obviously, only on loan till January. Obviously, a really good player. Done well in the National League before. I am a bit surprised that they've brought him back. The only reason being is obviously he's in that sort of number 10 position, sort of getting beyond the play. They've got a player there in Brad Stevenson, who I really rate. Really, really like him as a player. I think he's been good for them the last couple of weeks coming back into it. Obviously, a very similar type of player in that he's going to make those runs from deep. He's going to try and get in the box, score goals. Yeah, on the face of it, he's a good player. He's one of the best midfielders at this level, and he's been here before. And obviously, he knows the club pretty well. I imagine he'll link up quite nicely with Jamie Osborne again. Those two work quite well together. But yeah, I'm a little bit surprised, but potentially, Doncaster, obviously they've let him go till January. I imagine that there may well be a case of he actually goes to a team in League Two in January, and probably goes and tests himself, rather than just going back to Solihull. Obviously, teams in League Two can't sign anyone yet, hence why he's probably gone till January. So, yeah, I mean, good player, and he'll do well at Solihull.
Of course, Sam Pearson has gone to Eastleigh, and Raheem Shackelford as well, the fullback, has signed for Aldershot.
Yeah, really like Pearson, a player that nearly signed for Torquay. Obviously went to Western, did really well. Obviously under Scott Bartlett, who's now the manager of Eastleigh. He's bulked up a lot. I remember him playing on loan for Yeovil in the National League, and he really looked like a little boy, really. Very small. But he's really bulked up. He's using his pace better because he's a really quick and direct player. Can play through the middle or out wide. That's one thing that I think Eastleigh have missed, because obviously they got rid of Tyrese Shade, and they've not really had that quality on the wing since he's been gone. So, yeah, I think that's a really good signing for them. And he's only, early 20s, 23, I think. So, that's a good investment for Eastleigh, working under a manager that he knows. And then obviously Shackelford, obviously he was at Chesterfield, been in the league before, done well in the league with Chesterfield, did pretty well at Maidenhead, I believe. That kind of got him his move to Chesterfield. And yeah, I think that's Aldershot have got, they play wing backs, but their wing backs are not sort of out and out fullbacks. They're more midfielders. So that's potentially an area which John Coleman's looked at and thought, we could probably just tweak that and improve. So, and it's a permanent deal as well, I think, to Aldershot. So, that's a decent little signing for Aldershot.
I think defensively, I look at Aldershot and potentially, they lack a little bit of that experience at the back. You look at the pair they've got, I think it's Claridge and Jackson, who played the majority of the games. And I think for them, they're just too very young. And I've often seen them in individual games being bullied a little bit, particularly against, the experienced strikers. And it's very obvious what's going to happen. If you see a big target man coming up against those two, I always fear the worst for Aldershot this season. Of course, they've really struggled so far under John Coleman now, but they'll be looking over their shoulders, won't they, at the moment, particularly when you look at Sutton, who I think have improved particular performances recently. I think Morecambe, it's starting to click a little bit more for them now. And even Truro, from what I've seen of them, I think they're in a bit of a false position, to be honest. And it does feel like it's starting to come together there for them now. So, if you're looking at 4 sides that are going to go down, the way Aldershot are performing at the moment, you would probably put them in the bottom 4. So they certainly do need to start picking up results.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, really tight down there. Really close competition. I think Aldershot are, as you say, one of those teams that unfortunately have got to once again try and, battle against relegation, given the start that they've made. Obviously yet to win under John Coleman, albeit he's only been there a couple of games. And yeah, I think if you were to, I personally still had enough belief in the squad that Aldershot have got there, because I think it's a decent squad when fit. But the way that they're playing, conceding so many goals, you would say that they're probably one of the favourites to go down.
The way they're currently playing, yeah. I think as well, we've often seen a lot of sides. Every year, there's always one or two sides that slips through the net who potentially think, no, they'll be fine. But the way this season's going so far, a lot of the promoted sides have done very well. I think for me, I thought Scunthorpe and Boreham Wood, would be lower mid-table, potentially, looking to survive. And, they've shocked everyone, I believe, with, the starts they've had. And even, Brackley themselves, I think they've, when I look at the start of the season, they've had a reasonably good start, being able to establish themselves. Truro, I don't think have been awful. I think they'll improve. So it's looking like, again, it's going to be 4 sides that have been in this league in the past that probably established themselves that are going to struggle. And, Altrincham, they've picked up, which probably hasn't done Aldershot any favours recently. And I think Aldershot, they need to go on a good run of form. Every so often they get a win, but then it stops there, doesn't it? There's no momentum for them. Do you think, as an Aldershot fan, even if they do survive this season, it's another failed season for them? Because it just does feel like it's a bit repetitive now. And I think of the size of that football club, I think it always does feel like they should be doing a lot better. I know if I was an Aldershot fan, for just to survive, I'd be quite disappointed and underwhelmed.
Yeah, it's difficult. Obviously, they're a big club in terms of, stature. Obviously, losing Tommy Widrington a couple of weeks ago. I think there comes a time where you just have to realise that, that's where our club is at. That, the aim, first and foremost, is just to stay in the league. I think it would be the same with Braintree this year. Same with Altrincham at the moment. Same with Woking at the moment. They've been a couple of seasons where their aim really is just to stay up. So, yeah, obviously, Aldershot haven't got the biggest budget to go out and just spend like other teams. And you just got to perhaps be a bit realistic as to, where you're at, really. I think they could achieve more with the players they've got, but, yeah.
Just feels like, for me, with Aldershot's recruitment, what it's been like, it's always been just the same old average National League players, and that have been at about 5 or 6 clubs in the National League prior to coming to Aldershot. Think of some of the names in there. Tristan Abrahams, he's been at Eastleigh, Oldham, he's been around the block, and I don't think he's shined at any of those sides. I think if you actually look at the star players for Aldershot, you've gone on to great things in the past couple of years. It's always been players that they've found from the academy system or have come from the lower leagues. Josh Stokes and Tollage are certainly the two that stand out. But, I just think of their recruitment, it just does always often feel like they're just going for the same old names, Aldershot, and doesn't feel like, for me, there's much of a project there, if that makes sense. Like, I think you've got to be realistic, yes, with a budget, but Halifax have got a low budget and they're always competing. Wealdstone this season, they've got a lower budget than Aldershot, part-time. Tamworth as well. They're finding ways to, look to potentially progress as football clubs. And it just feels like Aldershot, it's just a little bit stale there. And I think they are the longest serving club in this division. And for me, I can't see anything changing at the moment. I think if anything's going to happen, one year they're going to have one very bad season. They're going to fall out of the National League.
Yeah, that may well, that may well be this year. I think Aldershot fans will hope it's not. But bigger teams than Aldershot have got relegated out the league before. So yeah, if you're not winning games, ultimately you're going to be going. You're going to be fighting against relegation and trouble. So it could well be for Aldershot that that this could be the year. I hope it's not, because I really enjoyed my trips to Aldershot. And obviously got a couple of good friends there, the likes of Rob and that. So I hope it's not, but could well be.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the stadium particularly. I often enjoy it as an away day. It's one of my favourite grounds in this league. It's quite quirky, isn't it? But no, we're going to come on to the predictions now. These are the current scores. It's 107 points to me to 105 to Paul. I've managed to regain an advantage on Paul, but I brought Joe on this week. You had a couple of bad weeks, but then I think all of a sudden, I think you had one of the best weeks that neither me and Paul have had, to be honest.
Yeah, well, flash in the pan, I think, Luke.
Well,
yeah,
hopefully.
Bit of a flash in the pan. Hopefully, it's I can have another good week. But yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult league to predict that you can keep having bad weeks. It's a bit of a luck of the draw, really.
Yeah, it certainly is. And as you can tell by the predictions, they're very close at the moment. They don't seem to be changing. Please remember everyone to like and subscribe. It genuinely does go a long way if you can do that. And it doesn't take much effort, I don't believe, either, to press a like button and then subscribe. So I'd really appreciate it if you could do that. Also, if you'd like to check out our channel sponsors, it's Cards Accepted. Use the QR code in the top right-hand side of your screen, and it will take you straight onto their page, and you get 50% discount on any order you do. Anyway, we're going to come on to the first game now. We're going to take a look at Aldershot versus Brackley. Altrincham versus Brackley, I should say. Of course, back-to-back wins now for Neil Gibson's Altrincham side. 2 clean sheets as well for them. Of course, I don't think they're the finished article yet, but I think for them, they're just desperate to get points on the board, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been quite impressed with Neil Gibson. I was impressed with him when he was at Wealdstone. Thought he did a decent job there. Obviously had a couple of good results, a couple of big results against teams in and around them. Obviously that last one against Truro. And yeah, I think that they are a decent side. I think they lack that killer edge. And obviously haven't got the biggest of squads anyway. For Brackley, adjusted pretty well to the National League. I think Gavin Cahn's doing a pretty decent job there. And, they've just tailed off a little bit of late. Obviously, they had that good performance in the FA Cup against Notts County. But they'll be looking to get back to winning ways, obviously after defeat last time out. I'm going to go with Altrincham. I just think they're finding a bit of balance at the moment, and Neil Gibson's got them playing. So I'll go 1-0.
They've brought South and Cooper back and Baines, haven't they? And they're working as a bit of a pair, aren't they, I think? And Sassy's coming to a decent bit of form defensively. So I feel like they're a lot more well-organised than what they previously have been. I totally agree with what you're saying on that killer edge. I think it's just a case of, if they can get that first goal. I think if they get the opening goal, they'll go on to win this game. It's just if Brackley do get that first goal, will it be a case of Altrincham struggling to break Brackley down? I think Altrincham will win this one. I'm going to go, I know you said 1-0, so I'll change it. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Altrincham win for this game. I think a few players are coming back from injury now as well for them. Carol Redding's back in the side on a regular basis, who offers something going forward. Someone I'm certainly watching for Altrincham this season. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Altrincham win. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, guys, and we will put them on the screen too. Kevin's gone for 1-0 Brackley for this game. So he feels that, they'll get back to a win. Of course, Brackley, I think, they very much build themselves on the defence, don't they? And that is probably what they're aiming to keep them up this season. Now, moving on to the next fixture, we're going to look at, it is going to be Boreham Wood versus Tamworth. Boreham Wood, of course, currently sits second in the National League. They're facing 11th place Tamworth, who, of course, have had 3 defeats in a row now for them. I can only see one winner in this game. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Boreham Wood win. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I think it'd be a difficult one for Tamworth. I mentioned obviously about the fact that they struggle against those better teams that are quicker and sharper. Obviously, a couple of players in Boreham Wood's team that are really doing well, the likes of Abdul Malik and Rush. I'm going to go fairly convinced. I'm going to go 4-1 to Boreham Wood in this one. I just think that real pace in transition could hurt Tamworth. And yeah, Boreham Wood are playing well.
Next fixture that we're going to preview then, it's going to be Braintree versus Truro. I do believe Truro are still yet to win away from home this season, if I'm correct. Of course, defeat to Altrincham, I think, last time in action in the National League. I think they're going to get back to winning ways. Of course, I think their first victory away from home is going to come against Braintree. I look at the moment at sides that I think potentially could be out of the depth in the National League, and I'm struggling to find many. But I think Braintree are probably the one that I could see falling away. I don't think so far there's any clear, obvious team that's out of the depth. I think we saw last season Ebbsfleet. We've seen the likes of Oxford City in the past. If there's anyone that I think's remotely close to that margin, I think Braintree are the side that I think are going to struggle the most this season. I think I'd probably have them to finish 24th at the moment. I think they lack a lot of depth, and I'm not particularly too convinced on the starting 11. I think if you look at Braintree as well, they're not awful defensively. They're actually a lot better. They're not conceding anywhere near the same amount of goals as sides around them in that relegation zone, but they've scored very little. I think they're the lowest scorers in the division, and for me, personally, I think it's a lot easier to become more organised defensively than it is to be able to be a lot better on the attacking side of things. I think, the likes of Aldershot, they're recruiting defensively. I think it's a lot easier to find, solid defenders than find, really good attackers that are going to get you out of this hole. And I don't think there's anyone in Braintree's side for me that's going to be able to keep them up this season. As for Truro, I think as a side overall, I'm quite impressed with them at the moment. Of course, poor defeat to Altrincham, but I think they'll get back to winning ways. I'm going to go 1-0 Truro. How do you see it going?
Well, big game. A 6-pointer, even though we're only sort of a third of the way through. Yeah, obviously Truro not one that way away from home. I think Braintree started the season pretty well at home. And then just of late, sort of, regressed a little bit. I'm going to go Braintree. Call me biased, obviously, but yeah, I'm going to go Braintree. I'm going to go 2-1. I think both managers will look at it as a game where they could probably get a win realistically. But I think that Braintree, they've had a tough couple of weeks. I think they'll look to get back on the horse, so to speak, and I think they'll edge this one at home.
Moving on to the next fixture, Carlisle United versus Eastleigh. 7 games unbeaten now for Carlisle, scoring a lot of goals. Of course, previously gone down to Southend and took all 3 points there. As for Eastleigh, gave York a good game, but of course, as the game progressed later on, York came from behind to win. Eastleigh, for me, just does feel like with them, it's the same old story. I can't see them progressing from mid-table this season again. The lack of consistency. I don't think they're good enough defensively either. And away at Carlisle, I think, Carlisle at the moment do feel like they're the team to beat. So I'm going to back Carlisle to win 3-1. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, Carlisle in great form. Con Clark and Linney can't stop scoring. I do like Eastleigh. I think they've got a good manager there now in Scott Bartlett, and they made a couple of good signings. And obviously went toe-to-toe with York in that game, which they just lost. I'm going to go Carlisle to win it, but I think it'll be quite close. I'm going to go 3-2 for that one. Another couple of goals maybe for Linney But I think they'll win that.
Next fixture that we're going to preview then is going to be Forest Green Rovers versus Gateshead. Gateshead have got a relatively good away form this season. I think they're 8th in the league on away form, which comparing that to their overall position is pretty good. As for Forest Green, after that little bit of a bad stint for them in terms of results against some of the better sides, they've picked up form once again, and I think are in recent weeks going under the radar slightly. The likes of brushing the likes of brushing the likes of Tamworth aside, defeating Boreham Wood. I think they're going about the business quite quietly once again. As for Gateshead, so mixed. You'd think after going away to Wimbledon, beating a League One side away from home, that would be the kickstart to their season to improve their league form, and it just wasn't. They got thumped by York, lost at home to Solihull Moors, and now they've got Forest Green away. And if I'm being honest, Forest Green have only had one defeat at home all season. I can only see one winner, and I'm going to go Forest Green to win 4-1. I'm actually going to go for this one.
Wow. Okay. I think it'll be a good game. I think both sides play fairly decent football. Been impressed by what I've seen of Forest Green. Gateshead are a bit of a weird team because every time you go to write them off, they pull a performance out of the hat. Obviously, went and beat AFC Wimbledon, which I certainly did not expect. I'm going to go. I'm going to go with a draw. Actually, I'm going to go 1-1. I think Gateshead will quite enjoy the challenge. I think they're a good footballing team, and I think they'll quite enjoy the challenge of going there and trying to go toe to toe with Forest Green.
Can't see it being 6-0 there.
No, I would definitely won't go 6-0.
Next fixture that we're going to preview then is going to be Hartlepool versus Wealdstone. Quite an interesting one. Hartlepool and Everston have got a bit of a good run going there at the moment. Very weird then throughout every season. It just does always feel like they go through patches. They sack a manager, they bring in another one, they get a manager boost. Then that momentum runs out and they end up sacking them, then bringing in another manager. Do you reckon it's the same with Nicky Featherstone now, or do you think they have really got something going there to be able to progress?
Well, obviously, I think Featherstone will probably want the job. He's a Hartlepool through and through, a bit of a club legend. Obviously, lots of games for them, and I think he'd be a popular choice. They need some experience for me. Personally, I didn't think they should have sacked Grayson. I think he's a decent manager, very experienced, and I think he'd certainly have been a safer pair of hands than Nicky Featherstone, because obviously he's new, he's learning on the job. Grayson's been there, done it. So, I would have personally stuck with Grayson, but obviously they've now got to get behind Featherstone and see if he can pull out some rabbits out of the hat.
Do you see this as a bit of a tricky fixture for Hartlepool? Of course, Wealdstone at the moment flying in the division. Another side going under the radar. They're just 1 point off the playoffs at the moment. Looking very comfortable to go on to survive this season, which I think is the ultimate aim, particularly if anything's based on the last couple of seasons, what's to go by. Hartlepool, only one defeat at home this season, but they draw an awful amount of games at home. Of course, it's a little bit toxic there with a lot of fans staying away from the ground at the moment. For me, I wouldn't be doing that as a Hartlepool fan. I know they're protesting to get their owner out, but I would be doing everything I can to support the team. They're only 3 points off the playoffs at the moment. And I think if you're staying away, the lower the crowd and the toxicity there, I can't say the word, but you know what I mean. It's going to have an effect on them, on the players. And I think Wealdstone will be able to get something out of this game, the way they're playing. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Of course, Alex Reid against his old side in this fixture. Yeah,
I'm gonna go with another draw. Same as you. I actually want to go a 0-0. Unfortunately, I think it'd be a fairly close game. I don't think there'll be a lot in it. And neither team are particularly free scoring. So I think it'd be a 0-0.
Next fixture that we're going to preview then is going to be Rochdale versus Aldershot Town. And of course, we spoke about Aldershot, of course, bringing in Shackelford today, full-back for them. Up against Rochdale, who will be looking to bounce back after a heavy defeat to York. Do you think they'll be able to do that?
Well, certainly if you're going to want to bounce back against anybody, then playing Aldershot's usually a good, safe bet, given how many goals they concede. Yeah, I think this is the sort of game that Rochdale will really favour, being at home, wanting to prove themselves after the defeat in the week. For me, I think Rochdale will win it fairly comfortably. It's weird. I still think Aldershot are a decent team, but they just cannot keep clean sheets. They concede far too many goals. And if you want to get results in this league consistently, you can't keep conceding 3 goals every game. So I'm going to go 3-2 to Rochdale.
I've gone 3-0 to Rochdale. Totally agree with what you've just said there about Aldershot. You know, in individual games, if you watch them, I think you often feel like there's no way Aldershot are going to go down this season. You know, the football they play, some of the goals they score. But the issue with them is keeping clean sheets. As you've mentioned, they concede way too many goals. Very open defensively as well. You know, they're often, on the front foot and then bang, a side catches them on the break because they've got too much of a high line. And sides with pace will hurt them. And that's been the case this season as well. You know, with the lack of experience defensively, if you've got an experienced forward, particularly in this match, someone like Manny Di Sarui, I can see him bullying Aldershot's defence. So I'm going to go for a 3-0 Rochdale win. Moving on to the next fixture, Solihull Moors versus Scunthorpe. I'll allow you to go first for this one. How do you see this going?
Yeah, I think it'll be a really good test of where Solihull Moors are at. Obviously, good manager in Chris Millington. I think they'll be fine with Joe Sabara back. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they, sneak into that playoff picture. And they have improved. They're consistently improving under Millington. So I think this will be a really good opportunity for them to see where they're at against the Scunthorpe team that are doing really well this season. Surprising a couple of people, me included. Andy Butler's doing a really decent job there. I'm going to go with a draw. I'm going to go 1-1. I think maybe a debut goal for Sabara, maybe. But I'm going to go 1-1. I don't think Chris Millington likes to, you know it yourself, Luke. I don't think Chris Millington likes to set up to give too much away. Fairly conservative. And I think a draw is probably fair.
I think first things first for them, for Solihull, that probably is the case with them to be better defensively, and I think they're very much a better side in that department now. I think they're a lot more organised, but I think unlike Halifax, he's got a lot more money to work with in terms of being able to bring in better players on paper. That is, we've already seen Joe Sabara bringing someone like that back on the attacking front. Scott High, who was probably one of Halifax's best players last season. Sinclair, who didn't have the best start to the season at York, was kind of frozen out a little bit, but I still see him as one of the better wingers in this division, in my opinion. And then even the likes of Workman, who's done very well himself with assists this season. I think he's getting the best out of players who probably were underperforming before he came in. Stevenson as well, and then even the forward that they've got in Wakely now, who scored 7 goals this season. I think going forward they've got a lot more options now. And if you compare Millington's time to what he had at Halifax, I don't think he had the budget to be able to go out and bring in these attackers like they've got now in the likes of Sinclair and Sabara. I'm very much thinking Solihull will get a win here. With just the recruitment that they've done, I think they're a lot better organised. I think Millington's got a good record with the way he sets up against the better sides. Yeah, I'm going to go for a Solihull win for this one. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Solihull Moors win, and it would actually be Scunthorpe's first defeat away from home this season. But I've just got a feeling for this match that Solihull may go out and win this fixture. Moving on to the next game, it's my team, Halifax, facing Sutton away from home. I think it's a bad time to be playing Sutton for me. I think they've seemed to find a little bit of form recently, scoring a lot more goals under the new manager, which I think a lot of us expected. How do you see this going?
Yeah, I agree. I think I liked what I saw from Halifax first couple of weeks of the season. And I mean, I like Adam Lakeland, good manager. But the last couple of weeks, it just seems to be a little bit off. Don't know why. Just seems to have, obviously lost the last game at home, which would have been disappointed. And yeah, Chris Agata's come in. There were 5 points adrift of getting out of trouble when he came in. They're now level on points with a team outside the playoffs, outside the relegation zone. So there has been an improvement, and they have been able to get results. Obviously, coming from behind in the last game against Morecambe, 2-0 down. I'm going to go with, sorry, Luke, I'm going to go with a 2-1 win for Sutton. I just think they've picked up a little bit of form at home, and Halifax have almost done the opposite, just fallen off of late. So I'm going to go with Sutton to nick it 2-1.
I don't hold anything against you for that. I think Halifax recently, results have been going against them. And I suppose as well, goal seems to be an issue. Against Hartlepool, they didn't score in 90 minutes when they dominated the majority of the game. Carlisle, I don't think they particularly offered anything going forward. They're not being as clinical. I think even under Millington, we didn't create many chances, but we were clinical and we hurt teams. This season, we're creating more chances. And although we're scoring more goals, we're not being clinical, I don't think, particularly in recent weeks. I think against York, that was a prime example. First half, we were 1-0 up. We had a couple of chances where we could have potentially gone 2-0 up in that game, and then we didn't. And then York got back on top and eventually got the equaliser. Against the Sutton side, I think we're going to get opportunities going forward. It's just whether we actually take them. And I think defensively this season, something I will say is because of the way we play, I think we are a little bit more open defensively than what we have been under Chris Millington, which I think a lot of fans are fine with as long as we're scoring more goals. But in recent weeks, we haven't been. For this fixture, though, I think potentially we may score more goals, but I could see us conceding a few, particularly with the way Sutton are playing at the moment on the forward front. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw for this game. Moving on to the next one that we're going to look at, it's going to be Woking versus Boston. Woking have come into a little bit of decent form recently, defeating Altrincham, defeating Tamworth away from home. Boston come into this after defeat against Rochdale. I'm going to go for a Woking 2-0 win. How do you see it going?
Yeah, Boston need a win. Couple of disappointing results, and they've just gone through a tricky patch. Obviously losing last time out as well. Woking, I expected them to pick up. Good manager in Neil Ardley. He knows this division inside out. And yeah, I expected them to pick up. I'm going to go with a Woking win. Don't think it'll be a pretty game, but I'm going to go 1-0 to Woking.
I think sides like Boston, potentially as the season goes on, will potentially be looking over their shoulders because sides around them are improving. And although they have got a little bit of a cushion at the moment, a 7-point gap, like I keep mentioning and repeating, it's a very long season and there's a lot of sides down there that I think have got a lot of quality and are in a little bit of a false position. Looking at Morecambe, who I think will actually pick up, as I think we've seen in recent weeks potentially. So I think sides like Boston could potentially be looking over their shoulders at the moment. And away at Woking, I think it's another side. It's not a good time to be playing them because I think they're a lot better defensively, more from what we saw in the second half of last season now with Woking. They're a lot harder to break down, I feel. And I think they'll win this match 2-0. Next fixture, I think it is Yeovil versus Southend United. Yeovil, another side who potentially could be looking over their shoulders at the moment. Of course, defeat against Scunthorpe. Southend themselves will be looking to bounce back after defeat to Carlisle. I think Southend will do that, though. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Southend win. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, I watched Yeovil a couple of weeks ago when they played Altrincham, and I was actually quite impressed by what I saw. Richard Dryden's might have been his first home game. Quite liked some of it. I thought they looked quite decent with the ball. And I still maintain that they should be doing more with the team that they've got. They've got some really good players. Obviously, only just going down by a 1-0 last time against Scunthorpe, against the Southend team who've started a little bit in the last couple of games. I'm going to go with a draw. I think that's probably fair. Both sides aren't really on it, but both sides I think have got quality. So I'll go 1-1.
I think as well, you think lots of Andrew Oliver. Do you really think Yeovil are going to be able to get the best out of him, like potentially Halifax did? Michael Offetti, of course, has returned there now. They have got a few quality players, haven't they, in that side, who particularly on the forward front should be doing a lot better. I think they should be scoring a lot more goals than what they've done over the course of this season. Moving on to the final fixture of the game week, it's York City versus Morecambe. I think this is set up to be quite a good match for me. Morecambe seem to be throwing everything at it at the moment, playing some nice football. But once again, results don't seem to be coming off like they would like. And in their current position, they need to start getting points on the board to get away from that drop zone. Of course, it is actually in their hands at the moment with that game in hand to climb out of the drop zone. But it's not a favourable fixture, is it, against York, who've just brushed Rochdale aside?
Yeah, I mean, I think York will definitely be the favourites. I mean, they can't stop scoring at the moment against a team in Morecambe who can't stop conceding. So I think it will be Morecambe's toughest test yet. Obviously, they're good going forward, Morecambe, but defensively there are some real question marks. I'm going to go with another big win, actually, Luke. I'm going to go with the biggest win so far on the predictions. I'm going to go 5-2. I think Morecambe will get.
How have you done that? I've got it written down here that I went for 5-2 as well. And I was trying to think of ways to justify it, so I'm going to have to change mine now. But
yeah, well, I think Morecambe will probably get a couple of goals because they are decent going forward. I think they've got a little bit about them going forward. And if York could score 4 against Rochdale, who you'd say are probably the best team defensively in the division, then they should have no problem in scoring 5 against Morecambe. So, over to you. You can go 6-2 or...
I will. I'll go 6-2 then. I think you've actually made me think that it could potentially be 6-2 because you've mentioned there York can put 4 against Rochdale. Who knows what they can do against Morecambe? I do still believe have the worst defence in the division this season, if I'm not mistaken there. I don't know how we've done that. Both thinking of a 5-2, but I suppose this is the sort of match where you could probably see a freak result. But no, I'm going to go for 6-2 and you can go for your 5-2. So I'm going to hope that yours doesn't come off now because it will be a good prediction that if it did come off. But no, that wraps up the predictions. And of course, that also wraps up the podcast. These are the current scores. At the moment, it's 107 points to 105. I have just got the lead at the moment. We've still not come up with a forfeit yet. And we need to think of one before there's a bit of a gap so we can both agree on the forfeit, I suppose. So I might get someone else to think of one. If you've got any ideas, guys, drop me a message. Of course, I've got to be fairly realistic. Don't be anything too ridiculous, if that makes sense. But no, also please remember to like and subscribe. It genuinely does go a long way if you can do that. And if you'd like to become a channel member, it is just £2.99 a month. As I've got you, Joe, where can people find you? And also, would you like to give your book a plug?
Yeah, Off the Line blog on Twitter, or X as it is, at that handle, Off the Line blog. And yeah, my book Diamonds in the Rough, been out for a couple of months now, and yeah, go ahead and buy it where you usually buy things. Amazon, I think it's online at Waterstones and WH Smith and all those good places. And yeah, a book about players that have come through from non-league and sort of looking at their journey.
Once again, thanks to everyone that's tuned in tonight. I do really appreciate it. And once again, Joe, thanks for joining me, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.